Good.
Hey, we're live.
It's been Flak Live again. You couldn't get away from us.
Melody, ask the same question again.
Yes, I shall. Preston. First, let me introduce him. Yeah, this is our guest for today, Preston Dennett, whose last name I have trouble spelling, but I think I've got it now. And he's the author of numerous books on UFOs and related topics. And his new one is Not From Here, Volume 4. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. That and Skinwalker Red. Now, I asked you before, but let me clarify to our viewers that it seems like the ET presence is trying to compete with AAA now. They're out and about to be helpful on the road. So,
yeah, UFO AAA, I guess you might call it.
yeah, there you
go. Yeah, this is a really interesting sort of pattern of UFO activity that I don't think a lot of people know about. I call these car lift cases. And there's quite a few, far more than I thought when I first started looking into this. I did have my own case. These are cases where UFOs will actually lift cars up off the road and, carry them for a short distance or sometimes a long distance. And I became interested in this when I was writing UFOs over in Nevada, because I ran into 3 cases in a row. And you're referencing probably my favorite case of this kind. Where people were helped. This involved 4 teenagers who basically had gotten their pickup truck stuck in the desert sands outside of Goldfield in Nevada. This was at night. They tried to dig themselves out and couldn't. They thought, okay, well, we're stuck here. One of us will walk out in the morning, but we're pretty much committed to spending the night out here. It was a remote area. And so these are, teenagers for the most part, and all 4 of them are sitting in the back of the pickup truck bed, and just talking. And actually, the subject of UFOs did come up. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we saw one? And sure enough, one showed up. I think that's an important point, actually, because this, just talking about UFOs or thinking about them or mentally reaching out can bring them down.
Yeah.
Right? And that's exactly what happened here in this case. It's so bizarre. I love this case. And Melody, if this was a completely isolated case, I probably would have ignored it because it's so fantastic. But it's not. There's a lot of cases like this. In this case, they're stuck in the sand. The UFO comes right down over their pickup truck and lifts it up out of the sand and places it back on the road. A really interesting case. This was reported to the National UFO Reporting Center many years afterwards.
Good old Peter.
Yeah, anonymously, so they weren't looking for publicity or anything. But an interesting end note to this case is the main witness, the guy who reported it, was able to locate his girlfriend who was with him at the time. They'd not seen each other in decades.
Yeah.
But he found her and he called her up because he wanted to know if she still remembered this. And the first thing out of her mouth was, do you remember when that UFO came down and lifted our pickup truck and put it back on the road? And he's like, yeah, I do. And they compared notes and they remembered everything exactly the same with one minor difference. He says that he found the experience quite frightening and actually screamed. He says, no, I didn't think it was frightening at all. I was laughing through the whole thing. She thought it was thrilling. So yeah, that's one case of 20.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, out in the basin around Skinwalker Ranch, they have that happen. They're not frequently, but it's certainly one of the more reminisced about experiences, especially among the native people there. And they talk about the sky friends who will come along and start your car back up. And that kind of thing.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I know back when I first heard about that sort of thing, I, I am by nature skeptical about everything, and but now, I mean, we have to be much more open to things, even if I hadn't already become that way. And so, the how many cases in total of you mentioned there had been another one of somebody being lifted up and moved for reasons other than abduction?
Yeah, this is definitely a thing. The Goldfield case was the earliest one I could find. That was in 1959. But I scoured the literature and I found about 20 cases like this, really from all over the world. And yeah, some are so strange. One, which I thought was particularly different, occurred actually in Hattiesburg. This is in Mississippi.
Yes.
And it involved 1973. Two couples had left a party that was getting a little bit too wild for them. You know, they're not drinkers really. So they decided to drive home. One couple in the front seat, one couple in the back seat. When suddenly they see this light kind of shining down from above over their car. And the car lifts up and gets put back down. Lifts up, gets put back down. And the wife turns to the husband and she's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "It's not me. It's that thing above us."
What did she think? He had.
I get it. I mean, when you gotta, when these things happen, people start looking for explanations.
Yeah, I know. I'm joking.
Yeah, J. Allen Hynek talked about this. He called it theory escalation, because you don't just jump to UFOs. You want to find something logical. So she's looking at him thinking, how is he doing this? Which of course he wasn't. And this UFO proceeded to lift this car up and set it back down about a half dozen times. Up,
Wow.
down, up, down. Is that not bizarre?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's going on here. I mean, there's got to be a motive, an agenda. And after looking at a bunch of, maybe there's teenage kids up there. Okay, let's try the tractor beam. You got it? Put it back down. Do it again. Honestly, but looking at all of them, in all seriousness, I think there is a purpose to these. And I think it's what we would call a UFO display, a sort of brazen type of activity that announces their presence. And this is in a way, this is in a way that makes it absolutely undeniable that something unusual is going on. And I can tell you the case is even weirder.
Yeah, it would be hard for the government to, tuck that away and hide it. So I know that I was talking to a lady. Are you familiar with the Woodrow Derenberger case?
Somewhat.
Okay. Indrid Cold and all of that. His daughter Tanya is going to be a future guest on this show.
Oh, wonderful.
And I was thinking in terms of the story that her dad told, which was so curious and odd, the pancakes and everything. And when you compare it to most of the stories you read about the ET presence, they're sounding more and more normal and sane. It's almost like they're getting us finally. And they know they don't have to come down with pancakes in the middle of the forest and go, here.
Yeah, well, UFO cases are known for their high strangeness. But I think that if you look at them and sort of filter out a lot of the misinformation and disinformation and fear-based thinking, you'll see they're very much like us. They are
Oh,
doing
yeah.
the same things we would do. Like I always say, their behavior falls under the same umbrella as human behavior. They are like us, more like us than different.
I've been communicating with a lady who's a multiple abductee, who's had her children stolen from her, and at least according to her, and it it almost makes you wonder if there's not some kind of parallel thing going on to make them look a whole lot worse than the general kind of UFO experiencer. And yeah,
Yeah, I think there is actually. I think there is sort of a couple of things going on here. We have a media that's just by nature fear-based. Fear sells. Money is
yeah,
the bottom line. And also a government that's putting forth an ET threat narrative. And a lot of people do have a lot of fear. So you can talk to people who have the same exact experience. And one was like, oh my God, this was awful. I hated it. And the other was like, I actually had a pretty good time. I
we had
talked
nice
to,
talk. Yeah.
yeah, in one of my books, I think it was Wondrous, I interviewed a couple from Canada who she was pregnant and her baby disappeared in utero following an experience. And she was okay with it. She says, I know my baby is fine elsewhere. And she later did get to meet the child, which is usually what happens.
Yeah.
So this is, as near as I can tell, an agreement. No, this is something that people do
Yeah.
with cooperatively. So I wouldn't say that people are abducted and kidnapped against their will and their babies are being stolen, though they may perceive it that way, especially initially.
Yeah.
But no, this is not completely accurate. This is my opinion based on my own research and all the cases I've, researched.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot to learn, and it takes people a while to move past the fear often. So I think that's why we see some of these reports.
Yeah, it's very true. And I think they, the same stream of misinformation starts leaking out into the suburbs, which is, I guess, where podcasts are. And but let's get back to Not From Here, Volume 4. The Another interesting thing I found was the number one holiday although it makes sense in retrospect, for sighting UFOs, which is
Halloween?
Nope.
No.
It's a good guess.
Well, I figured everybody's out at night walking around.
Yeah.
probably close to number 2.
It would be a good day for ETs to come down because who would know?
Yeah.
There's some movies like that.
Oh, good costume.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But no, this is absolutely a thing. And I was shocked to find out that the number one day for UFO sightings each year is the 4th of July, Independence Day.
Oh, same reason. Out at night looking up at the sky.
I think that's part of it. There are millions of people outside looking at the sky, but I think it's more than that, honestly. I think what we have here with all these fireworks going off is a way of attracting UFOs. Because according to the witnesses, these objects will come down right basically before the show starts or right when it starts. And in a lot of cases, and I can tell you there's hundreds of cases like these, hundreds. I've had to do an enormous amount of research to sift through these cases to determine that they weren't just seeing fireworks.
Yeah.
They're not. These aren't just sky lanterns or party lanterns, that you send aloft with a little candle. These are solid craft, portholes. A bunch of cases involve, ETs looking out the windows. It's so interesting because they will come very low level, and they're in some cases, they just appear to be looking at the fireworks and enjoying it. But in some cases, they're like, okay, y'all want a show? We'll put on a show for you. And they will. They will do another show that's even more spectacular than the fireworks show. And one of my favorite cases of that kind occurred in Glen, Mississippi in 1988 to a mother and son. This is kind of a poignant case. I don't know why, but it just kind of touches me for some reason because the mother is watching from the doorstep as her teenage son is shooting off fireworks. So they're having their own little fireworks party. And as he's doing it, suddenly a fleet of little V-shaped craft comes zooming down. There was a half dozen of them, 6 or 7, and put on a show for 20 minutes, darting around, stopping, swooping down, going around each other, clearly wanting to be seen, putting on a display. And probably would have stayed longer, except as happens in a number of these cases, military Air Force jets showed up and chased them away. So
probably doing what they felt was the right thing to do, even though the UFO folk were probably just there seeing the poor kid having to light his own fireworks and said, hey, I got an idea.
Right? I mean, there's so many cases. The average number of sightings, according to, NUFORC, National UFO Reporting Center in MUFON, is anywhere from 5 to 20. And of course, we know it's much higher than that because most people don't report. But if you look on the 4th of July, July is the most common month, but the 4th of July, it goes up to 50 or 100. And I thought, no, initially I was so skeptical. I'm like, if you see a UFO on 2 days, I don't want to hear about it. April 1st, you're lying.
Yeah.
Or 4th of July, you're misperceiving. This is what I thought. You're seeing fireworks. I don't want to hear it. But, you can't just throw out evidence that's not scientific. You have to, at least examine people's reports. And going through them, I figured that a lot of these people are seeing sky lanterns. Yeah. Because they're describing these little fiery orange orbs that kind of hover and perhaps dart around and from a distance. And you can see this online. They're very impressive. They look large. They can get up to 4,000 feet in altitude. And if they catch the wind right, they can seem to fly in formation and stop and hover and then go up and move the opposite direction.
Well, luminaria also it's usually sent up in cooler weather. And that alone, the mist will catch the illumination and make it look bigger. And it's...
But the problem with the sky lantern theory, I mean, there's a number of problems, is that, one, they only last for 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's the other part.
2 is how many of these sightings can be attributable to that. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And the fact is, UFOs can have that same exact appearance and sort of take advantage of that. I mean, we know they will mimic stars at times. So why not look just like a UFO lantern or a sky lantern? And I came to conclude that, a lot of these are, although you could explain it as sky lanterns just from the description, they're probably genuine UFOs.
Yeah.
So,
well, if we don't know what they are, they're definitely UFOs.
Yeah.
I know that someone was making a comment on a group that I'm in and regarding orbs. And, there's some people that just have it out for anything that is round, made of light. And this person was going on at length about that. And I said, well, are you familiar with the video that the Skinwalker Ranch people have. And of course, they have many pieces of video of orbs being intelligent, moving around, actually navigating around things, stopping to look at things. It's amazing. And these things are, they look like an orb as seen in any kind of ghost show or UFO show. And these have been examined and established as not being bugs, dust, the usual. And, we have to accept the fact that there's stuff flowing around we just don't know about. And it's not all, unfortunately, because of people like the late Carl Sagan, and who apparently is not as well thought of as I thought he was, and some of the other ones, many of whom were on Jeffrey Epstein's island. So therefore they were, well, one can imagine. So that would tell us that a lot of what we have been told by agencies that we're supposed to trust and listen to with regards to science have been stilted, if not absolutely lying to us. So, we have to open our own eyes and look at these things and read and study and discover, because we have to be able to trust our own resources.
Yeah, if there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's you don't want to look to answers about the UFO phenomena to the government.
Yeah.
They're just not going to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Now, Preston, do you watch Skinwalker Ranch?
I watched the first couple of seasons, and then kind of fell off my radar. But I've been getting people telling me, you got to catch up. It's good.
It is.
Well,
It's
they're
very
finally going to be doing what I couldn't understand why they weren't doing in season 4. They're going to excavate the mesa. They're actually going to dig a hole and
They
find
already
what
have.
it is. Yeah, but you always are a year behind with that show.
Yeah.
Because they've completed the season before they start showing it to you.
Right.
They have to get it okayed by the government.
It's an interesting show. There's a lot of UFO reality shows out there, and a lot of them I'm like, I don't know. But they seem to be doing actual, scientific observations, and they've got some intelligent guys on there. So, yeah,
Well,
it's getting good reviews.
It's a television show.
Right.
So they don't want to do anything that will cause the show to go off the air. Here, let me show you something here. See?
Yeah. Well, there is a media cover-up. We know it.
Yeah.
So the secret of keeping Skinwalker Ranch on the air. That's my.
Well, they. I know that there are things that have been seen that they can't talk about. And I happen to, my educational background is in cultural anthropology. And somebody I know who knows somebody who knows somebody, that kind of thing, is up there working with the team to uncover something that's been discovered. And let's just say that I don't know if this will ever make it to the public awareness, but they've uncovered something that is much more in keeping with an ancient society than, it's not a spaceship. It's something else, but it's something equally as intriguing.
Well, the rumors I've been hearing is something about finding a buried pyramid.
Yeah, well, that's the one that I heard too. I think I told you that one.
Maybe. I don't
Yeah,
remember where I hear stuff.
I understand. It's
But
okay, bro.
just to bring a couple things up, there was an episode not too long ago where they had this gentleman, Chris Bartell.
Yeah, he used
Now,
to be.
he had worked for Bigelow when Bigelow was doing it, and he was commenting that when they tracked this one Skinwalker or whatever it was, and it went into a cave, and in the cave they found these canine traps, and that was inside the cave. So what I didn't understand was why on the very next episode, Travis Taylor is having a coronary because they found metal in the cave. Well, wasn't that trap made out of metal? I mean, a piece might have fallen off of it. That's why they found metal in the cave. So,
Well, we don't know context, but it's there's all kinds of stuff that they can't put it in context. Thomas Winterton is very responsive to viewers. And if you have a question like that, it's usually a good idea to message him because he's the guy that almost died when his brain went. So he has a lot of, at least to me, a lot of integrity when it comes
so that
to
would be this guy right here in the back with the cowboy hat.
with the cowboy hat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it is a TV show, and having been on a number of UFO TV shows, I wonder about them. I know I've been misrepresented, sometimes badly. So
they've got so many of those UFO shows, that UFO Hunters.
Yeah.
That one, I don't know if you've watched that. Then I think Preston, I think you mentioned a woman that was on an episode of the one where the guy's from the FBI and he's trying to track down UFOs. They did two.
Yeah.
I forget what it's Ben something. And he interviewed a woman
Hanson,
who got to see her kid. The aliens brought her kid back, and she could tell it was like half alien and half her. And so I don't know if that's an incident that you were speaking of, Preston, or if you were talking about somebody else.
On one of the TV shows, I was discussing an incident where a guy had a contact experience that he actually found quite friendly and positive. But when it got into the show, they basically overlaid my testimony with, this person is scared every day of his life that he's going to have a repeat encounter, which simply wasn't true. So that's kind of what I'm talking about with some of these TV shows and how careful you have to be with what you're looking at. But, that's, like I said, fear sells. It's unfortunate because these accounts, unedited, are fascinating enough. I mean, you really don't need to sensationalize them in any way. They're very interesting.
well,
as I've always said, this is a positive thing for people. The UFO contact is good news. That's what my research shows.
Yeah. Well, happily, there's the one thing, and going back to Skinwalker Ranch, is it's heavily overseen by scientists. And as much smack as I talk about science, it's still the only road of inquiry we really can somewhat rely on. And certainly,
Eric Bard is a physicist. They don't talk about that very much on the show. They just call him an investigator, but he's a physicist.
Yeah.
So, and when the show started, they had three scientists on the show. Now, the one guy, Jim Segala, he quit for some reason, but he's no longer. He will not talk about it. They have tried to get him to talk about why he left the show, but he's under contract to keep his mouth shut.
I just got a message from somebody who's part of the group that Skinwalker Ranch Insider is connected to. I don't go on there anymore because the minute I joined Insider, everything in my house started breaking down. So
Oh yeah, that was when you were watching the cameras.
yeah, that hitchhiker thing. No, thank you. But there, what happened with Segala is something to do with a contract he had somewhere, and he used health as it's weird. It's weird. So who knows? But the important thing is that if the scientists are kept part of it, then the information coming out will be more easily assessed. And so that for that reason, I like the show.
But I was
And it's
wondering
coming
why.
back.
I was wondering why they don't promote the fact that Eric Bard is a physicist more, because they really play that down. You know, they don't talk about that.
I think there's an element of people thinking that they're somehow, like they don't mention Dr. Eric Bard. He's got a lot of initials behind him. So does Travis Taylor. He's an
Well, Travis Taylor is a celebrity scientist. He's been on a whole bunch of these reality alien TV shows. So, he's used to he likes being a celebrity. Yeah. So I think the possibility may exist that he doesn't want those other people being scientists on the show. In fact, I heard that. That was one thing that I heard, that there was a conflict between him and Segala over their ideas about what was causing certain things. And that.
Oh, yeah, I did hear that. Yeah.
And that Travis Taylor insisted that he leave the show. So, and I think that might be why they play down the fact that Eric Bard is also a scientist. Maybe they only want one scientific person on the show. So,
but they regularly point out that Eric Bard has, he's always doing.
He's got a scientific background, is what they say.
But no, he has a couple of PhDs. So he's whatever that means. Foods. Anyway, let's talk to Preston. He's more interesting. My brother and I often do this. We start talking about a topic, and then we have. What's your favorite story from the book, other than the one about the AAA UFO?
Oh gosh, my favorite story? Eesh.
Yeah, you got some great ones.
That's a good question. I am not sure which one would be my favorite. Probably one of my favorite chapters in the book is the connection between UFO contact and human levitation.
Ah, yes.
And this I found quite surprising. And it kind of came to my attention after I had received a number of cases, and it was simmering in the back of my mind, but I really didn't connect it as a thing until I spoke with Dolly Safran, who we had on the show.
Yeah. Yeah, Dolly. Yeah.
Yeah, who had that experience many times as a child, mostly, but up through her teenage years and really beyond, with physical levitation. And many instances of it. And I thought, well, gosh, I have a few other cases. And then I remembered Whitley Strieber of Communion fame described having this experience in July of 1986 in his cabin in upstate New York, where he basically spontaneously levitated. I thought, wait a second, I know of another case from Jacques Vallée, who is very well known in this field.
Yep.
And describes the case of Dr. X, who in 1968 had an encounter, was struck by a beam of light from a UFO, which actually healed him of two conditions: an axe wound on his foot and partial paralysis. And in the weeks that following this experience, he spontaneously levitated twice. And his wife actually confirmed this, because on one of the occasions, he was able to grab a piece of flypaper and stick it to the high vaulted ceilings. Their ceilings were like 15 feet high or something.
Isn't it fascinating? We've been told how many times that it goes against the laws of physics, levitation, and yet there's so many cases of people who levitate.
Yes, it's astonishing to me. I did not realize that this was a thing, but it absolutely is. Bud Hopkins had multiple cases. I started digging in. Yeah, I found a number. I interviewed a guy and his sister. Well, one guy who he and his sister were taken on board a craft as kids and put back in their home, and they went down into the basement to play and floated around the basement for the next hour, both of them.
Had fun.
It's amazing. I talked to another guy, a Marine officer, a good witness, who had a series of onboard experiences at age 6, I think it was, 5 or 6, in Southern California. And following that, he had 2 spontaneous levitation experiences.
See, we didn't get any fun stuff like that.
No.
All we got were the UFOs going overhead.
It's funny, after I put out this book and I did a YouTube episode about it. A guy called me from Europe, out of his mind. He's like, "Oh my God, I am so glad I saw this episode you put out, because that happened to me. And I have been searching for decades." This happened to him when he was a little kid, had an encounter, and for the next year, he had multiple spontaneous levitation episodes. This is not a UFO picking them up. This is something that is transformed in a person spiritually, psychically, right, where they start having these experiences. It's a thing. Yeah. To me, this is really part and parcel of the UFO contact experience, because this is one of their main agendas, is to wake us up to our own I don't like the word supernatural really, or paranormal even, because it's not abilities. These are natural human abilities that we just don't fully understand. Like you said, Melody, they're not actually defying the laws of physics. Just we don't understand what's going on. We don't
understand the laws of physics. Exactly.
Not fully.
I just watched, this is a person I have personal issues with, but his documentaries can be very good. David Paulides, he has a new one out about UFOs regarding his missing theories, and he's problematic at best as a person in dealing with him, but he has a couple of examples of people who saw things levitated, but always in relation to a ship that is lifting something up, And however, he did have one fellow who was lifted up and subsequently was found to have been cured of a number of different ailments. Yep. So even within all of his dark natterings, there are instances of light, things happening that are for the betterment of the people. So
precisely. Yeah, this is there. If you actually objectively look at the UFO contact experience, and when people are taken on board, you'll see that it's really entirely positive. Yes, there's an enormous amount of fear, but that's coming from us. Yeah. People are physically examined, and that can be uncomfortable. Nobody really likes going to the doctor, or rarely do they but they're being healed. They're being given a tour of the craft. They're having their spiritual abilities and psychic abilities awakened. They're being given all kinds of really interesting information. And yeah, it's overall, I think, a very positive experience. It's
I
just
must say,
not getting into the mainstream media because there's such a disinformation campaign. It's concerted, it's well-funded, it's widespread.
I spoke once with someone who he's has an odd role in all of this. He produced a film called is it the Myth Men, or the it was about people who create illusions for the government, and supposedly. However, the same fellow was a great fan of Andy Kaufman. So you have to take everything with a boulder of salt. But he was saying that that there are certain memes that are put forth into the body politic to keep people boxed in. And if people realize how much power our minds have in terms of changing our situation and that sort of thing, it would get out of hand. And that's what the government's afraid of, is that we all start being able to handle our own circumstances. And then what the heck would they do with us, you know?
Yeah, well, the pharmaceutical industry definitely does not want people to know that they can heal themselves,
Yeah,
which
well,
the ETs are all about. But Melody, I thought of another favorite case from the book, if I
oh,
might,
yes, please.
because I did a chapter all about, and this is so funny to me, extraterrestrial hitchhikers.
Ah, yeah.
Which sounds outrageous, but I'm telling you, I found well over a dozen cases. And this is absolutely 100% real. This does happen. That's all over the world. And one of my favorite cases of this kind occurred in Sao Paulo, Brazil, to a gentleman who was on his way to work. This was in 2003. And he's just driving along and sees a strange looking figure by the side of the road. And yeah, these cases have a number of things in common. People do often feel compelled to stop. And the figure that they're looking at not only looks strange, but is also dressed strange and acts strangely. So we have sort of a trifecta here, three different things that point towards these guys being actual ETs. But in this case, he stops, picks up this guy who comes into the car, and he has a number of very unusual features. He's very short. He's got cat-like eyes, a bald head, and is wearing this tight-fitting jumpsuit with weird shoes.
Okay, Mark, let's see your shoes. I'm sorry, go ahead.
That sounds like the guys from Fringe.
I'm telling you, this is the thing. He looks at the guy's fingers, his hands. He's got 6 fingers on each hand. And weird skin. And the guy who's driving asks him, like, where do you want to go? He just points to the front of the road, ahead, and says, didn't say anything. Actually spoke in weird croak-like noises, and was just behaving very strangely. And so the guy took off driving and carried this guy for several miles. And kept looking at him because he was so strange. Everything about him, his hands, his skin, his eyes, his clothes, no hair. Very much a description that we do see of ETs, perhaps not grays, but as you know, the variety of humanoids is off the charts.
Yep.
And at some point, he feels compelled to stop. This guy gets out and walks out into a field out in the middle of nowhere. So I don't know what's going on here, but there's case after case like this. It's just bizarre. And I don't think people realize it. This does happen.
You know, I must apologize for interrupting you because I know it does, and I've heard enough stories myself, just with my writing you know, it. What I've heard is a very tiny number of stories next to the ones you have, and you know, we live in a weird world. This stuff happening that we have no idea about, and the when you hear, as I recently did, a fellow who is a longtime science teacher who told the story about having picked up one of those ghost hitchhikers and, you know, drove them all the way down and had talked with them all the way there, and then pulled over to try to drop them off and looked over and they were gone. And you hear these stories and I just assume it's nonsense because that's me. However, here is somebody very credible telling their story. And UFO ones would tend to be even more credible, in my opinion, because we now know that they exist and that we have an ET presence.
Yeah, there's some remarkable parallels with the phantom hitchhiker phenomena. It makes me wonder if some of those phantom hitchhikers might not be ETs, but generally speaking, these ET cases have the patterns that I mentioned, with the weird behavior, the weird appearance, the weird clothes, people feeling compelled to stop, and a number of them do result in onboard experiences as well. So I think this is sort of a way to flag down a car, and next thing people know, they're being taken on board.
Yeah.
So
Perhaps it's the old vampire thing where if you invite them into the car, they have permission to take you on a little journey. But
I suspect they're just basically introducing themselves in a way that perhaps reduces the fear factor a little bit. There was a case where two ladies driving through the Arizona desert alone, and out in the middle of nowhere, there's this beautiful blonde man, very handsome. And they're two ladies out on a drive alone, and they don't pick up hitchhikers, but they did feel compelled to stop. And this guy gets in and starts singing to them in sort of not singing, but talking to them in a sing-song voice. That was very melodic, somewhat entrancing. And they both felt incredibly comfortable with him, like he was a good friend. And he said, basically, don't be afraid. You're going to be fine. And that's when the car did lift up off the road. And they were taken on board a craft and had a pretty standard onboard experience. And were put down, and they ended up driving to the next town to call their family. And their family was frantic. They're like, they thought maybe an hour or two had passed. Their family's like, no. We've been trying to reach you for 5 days. They were gone for 5 days. Like, the Travis Walton case, not just an hour or two, a while.
Mark, did you have something you wanted to ask? I saw your brow wrinkling.
No, I'm just listening.
Oh, okay.
See, all of my preparation was to talk about Skinwalker Ranch, and we kind of got rid of that in a hurry. So I'm afraid I'm not prepared.
We'll talk about that another week.
I didn't get a chance to hear Preston's book. I listened to his schoolyard one, but I didn't get a chance to listen to this one. Is this audio on Audible?
It will be soon. I'm working on that. There's 4 volumes, so I think I'm getting.
I want to start with volume 1. I don't want to start with volume 4 because then
there's going to be a volume 5 too. I love finding these weird patterns in UFO activity.
Are you using AI at all with them?
No, I use real intelligence, not artificial. I say that with all humility.
Well, that can be helpful in finding patterns and things like that.
Well,
As a writer, it sucks, but
now I don't know if Melody remembers, but we talked about my mother's UFO experience there by Edwards Air Force Base, but our father also saw a UFO.
yep.
He was in the military and he was coming back home from the base for a weekend, and he was on a bus, and it was just him and the bus driver were all that was left, and they were out some swamp area, and they saw a UFO, and the bus driver stopped, and they both got out and said, "Did you see that?" My dad says, "No, I didn't, and neither did you." And,
That sounds like that. Yeah.
yeah.
There's nothing like seeing it with your own eyes. There really isn't.
Yeah, he said it was an orange ball, just like an orb floating over the swamp. But then my dad was saying, "Oh, then we heard about swamp gas, so we figured it was probably swamp gas." But that pretty much got debunked, the whole idea of swamp gas.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, swamp gas is a thing, but it only flares up for momentarily. And they don't have portholes. They don't leave landing crates. And ETs do not come out.
no lights on swamp gas. I know that Mark and I both have seen UFOs. I had one other experience with my husband and I, where we saw what looked like two gliders, but it couldn't possibly have been gliders because they were going over the treetops in our town. And, there's no way to do that. And that was, so I suspect Mark and I probably have been interacting with things like that, as have our parents, for a while. It would also explain why our parents were brought together, because trust me, it wasn't because of any inherent harmony in their personalities. But
well, our mother's first husband, they got married because my mother was pregnant. So
these things happen.
yes, she was 16, and then my sister ended up with the same exact thing happened to her.
Yeah.
If you recall.
Yeah.
Our sister Pam.
Yeah.
Well,
but anyway, I think that there are things going on behind the scenes of all of our lives that have greater implications than we suspect. And certainly I've been having paranormal things happen in my life since I was a little kid. So that all sort of dovetails with all of this. Now, have you, Preston, is this something, I know we discussed when you sort of became aware to your family's interactions and things, but have you personally had paranormal experiences?
oh yeah. It ramped up to a high degree at one point, but I did have a couple when I was young. The first one was around age 9, I think, maybe 10 or 11. But me and my sister, Victoria, were watching a game show, which I believe was called Treasure Hunt.
Yeah.
And that involved, there was all little things that they do on the game show. But I knew all the answers. I really did. I knew who would be picked out of the audience. I pointed her out. You have to open a canister to play, and one of them has the flowers and the other two don't. I'm like, it's the third one. Of course it was. And then there's, I think it was like 80 boxes or something on stage of all, little boxes and enormous boxes, all numbered. And one of them has a huge check in it. Of course, your chances are 1 in 100 or whatever it is of choosing the correct box, because all the others are empty and one has the check. And I don't remember which number it was. It was high. It was like number 70 something. Or I'm like, it's this number. It's in that box, Victoria. I know it is. And it was. And we just laughed. We rolled on the ground. I didn't think it was psychic because I didn't know what psychic was.
Right.
I just knew I knew the answer. And to this day, whenever I talk to Victoria, not every time, but I will remind her. I'm like, you remember that? You're my witness. She's like, yeah. She rolls her eyes. I remember, because I'm constantly making sure that she doesn't forget it, because that was amazing to me. And looking back in hindsight, I'm like, wow.
Those are the times. Yeah.
Yeah, I would later have a lot actually, because when I started investigating UFOs, I started having UFO sightings, and some were quite low and interactive even. But at the same time, I got really into astral projection and ghost hunting. So I was, seeing ghosts every now and then, going to these haunting places, and did see, when my mom passed away, I saw her spirit back in 1984, and got real into, as I said, astral projection, and that opened up me in a way I can't even begin to describe, because I started having past life recall and clairvoyance and episodes of telepathy and an enormous number of precognitive dreams. I mean, at some point it was almost nightly. There would always be one little thing during the day, like, oh, this is going to happen, or this person's going to call, or, you just, and anyone who's had paranormal experiences knows what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing once it opens up. It really does. Jessica Wolf is pointing out the Oscars are on tonight. I mentioned that because there's a science fiction film that is up for the big one. We got 2 minutes. Okay.
No, there's two science fiction shows.
Oh,
Avatar. Avatar is a science fiction show, but it has
monkeys.
There is no chance. I'll bet you anything that Avatar does not win Best Picture.
It's James Cameron's Sea Monkeys. That's what that is. No, I'm rooting for Everything Everywhere All at Once. So that is science fiction. The other one is, I don't know.
The one I hear is the gray horse in that is women talking.
Yeah, I loved that film. I did.
I heard it's very well thought of, and a lot of people think that's going to win it. It's the underdog, but a lot of people think that's going to win it.
Whenever I watch an awards show, I like to try to exercise my psychic abilities and sort of peek around the corner there and see if you can, see who the winner is.
You want to call it and see what's going to win?
No, I don't. I need to know the nominees first.
Oh,
I haven't, I don't see all these movies either. So
I have, oddly enough, seen all of the movies except one.
Oh, wow.
That is not normal for me.
I haven't seen a single one.
Yeah. Almost all of them are great except for the one Mark can tell you about later.
I tried watching All Quiet on the Western Front.
That's the one.
But
didn't work.
It's the effects are really good. We're working in the camera end of the motion picture industry. I always get a kick out of watching how they filmed it, what camera angles they used. Because I don't know if you know, I work for a company called Red Digital Cinema, and we build the motion picture cameras for a lot of the studios. All the Marvel films were filmed with our cameras. And so I get a kick out of watching that. All Quiet on the Western Front, that was really, they took a big field and they poured water all over it, dug ditches, and that's how they filmed a lot of the battle scenes.
Right.
But it's really hard. It's really hard to follow.
Remakes are always a challenge.
That's true.
That was done before, wasn't it? All Quiet on the Western
Oh yes.
Front. An old
Oh,
movie.
many years ago.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Preston?
like yes.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
go for it.
we're out of time.
Yeah.
Let Melody talk to Preston.
Preston, why don't you tell everybody any media, social media you have, and anything else you'd like to put forth
Yeah.
out there?
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Melody. I do have a website. Just punch in my name, it'll take you there. PrestonDennett.weebly.com. I've got a YouTube channel, which I'm pretty excited about. It's growing fast. I'm certainly available on
And
Facebook.
how does anybody find that? Tell them how to find it.
Yeah, just again, punch my name in. It's called UFOs and the Paranormal with Preston Dennett. And my books are available on Amazon, including Not From Here, Volume 4, and Symmetry, which, by the way, has just passed its 1-year date and is still on the bestseller list.
Yep.
Super excited about that. 1 year on the Amazon UFO bestseller list.
That is not easy to do.
Yeah, I'm just so grateful and really humbled by it. It's thanks to Dolly. It's her story, and
Yeah.
it is amazing.
Dolly will be with us in the I forget the date, but she will be with us. And
That's awesome.
on that note, thank you so much, especially at the last minute, coming on and being with us again. It's
Yes,
always a delight.
Preston was nice enough. We had another guest, not nearly as good as Preston, that canceled on us at the last minute, and Preston was kind enough to jump in cold and help us out. So thank you, Preston.
Always a pleasure. Anytime.
You're a great guy. You guys all have a great week. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Happy St. Patrick's Day to our fellow Irish people. Well, we're half Scots-Irish, so it's in the mix. So we will see you next week.